It's a beautiful morning, mid-May. We're out in the shade garden. We're going to look at a few plants that are looking really great right now and are giving us our second layer in the shade garden. If you look at past shows, you've seen our early spring bulbs. They're all finishing up. We've had some decent weather. The perennials are starting to really grow. And this is the stage we're at now. So I'm going to step into the garden. We're going to look at a few plants that bring us this sort of second layer of gardening, of the garden at this time of the year. Early stuff, we do have a few early things. Our hellebores are still looking really good. The nice thing about the hellebores is that they stay looking good because the part that we see that gives us all the color isn't actually flower petals. It's the sepals that hide the petals. Hellebores don't actually have petals, so the sepals stay colorful and last a really long time while the plant's forming seed. So there's a seed pod forming right there. And they'll look good still for another couple of weeks as the foliage emerges and gets to its summer lushness. I'm going to go back in a little bit. I hope you can catch these, Laura, if you can zoom in a little bit. So we're back here into this area that in the early spring, a few weeks ago, was carpeted with snowdrops. After that, carpeted with corydalus. And now we're into another one of our beautiful spring ephemerals. A plant that comes up, blooms, does its thing, and then disappears. And that's the Virginia bluebells. These guys right here. Such a wonderful plant. When the bulbs first come up in the spring, you can see the Virginia bluebells as little purple clusters of new shoots. After that first bulbs are gone, they really take off. You get these great big leaves, which might be a bit scary, but in a couple of weeks' time, you're not going to see these anymore. They're in bloom right now. They often start off a little pink and then turn this wonderful shade of true blue. I'll bring them a little closer so you can sort of get a good look at the flower.
Put it in front of your shirt there.
That's the Virginia bluebells there. Really wonderful shade of blue. They're about halfway through their bloom period, so they're just starting to set seed as well. We let that happen. And if you sort of scroll through the garden, Laura, you can see that over the years we've built up quite a colony of self-sown Virginia bluebell seedlings. Like I said, these guys are like a bulb as well. More of a tuberous root. But they come up, they do their thing, they set their seed, and they disappear. After they're all done, there'll be another layer working its way up, and that'll be hostas, ferns, things like that. So we've actually tripled the amount of interest in the shade garden by layering it in the different stages of interest. So we've got lots and lots of Virginia bluebells. Then we have this other plant here with big bright yellow flowers. And this is a really neat plant. You might think, oh my God, I've got that, it's a weed. We're going to look at two different plants that are similar. This is Stylophorum, or a woodland poppy, sometimes called celandine poppy, sometimes called greater celandine, I think. It's a big, beautiful, bright yellow poppy flower on really attractive ferny foliage. It does seed around. Now they haven't perked up for the morning, for the summer, for the daytime yet. But you can see how many there are here. These are all sort of self-sown seedlings from a small start of 2 or 3 plants. They look great with the Virginia bluebells. They're a great transition plant from the early spring to the summer hostas and ferns and things like that. Interesting thing about Styloforum is that it is actually a very rare Ontario native plant. It grows in 1 or 2 small areas in Ontario, but when you get it in the garden, it's fantastic. It's vigorous, it seeds around, like I said. You can see lots of it around. It doesn't get invasive. It can be maybe a little aggressive seeding, but it's easy to remove seedlings when you see them. There is an imposter that looks like it, and we're going to show you that in a minute. But while we're in the garden, we've still got our epimediums are blooming now as well. Epimedium versicolor sulphureum, the beautiful soft yellow flowers. Their new foliage is emerging, very delicate, but these are tough as nails. If you've got dry shade in a garden, get some epimediums. They are fantastic. They look good all season long. Some of the varieties like sulphureum, rubrum, a couple of others are evergreen and look good well into December in the garden. So it's a great addition to the shade garden. Another plant that I just think is fantastic in the shade garden is this guy here. We got a few of them here. It's a few clumps. It is reseeding a little bit. Most of these are self-sown seedlings. This is Saruma henryi, or upright ginger. So it's somewhat related to our Asarum canadense, our native wild ginger. You can see the look of it in the leaves, but it forms a clump. So you can see these are all distinct clumps. They emerge, they've been blooming already for a little while. As they get taller, they keep coming up with more flowers, and then a little bit taller and more flowers. So they bloom for quite a long time at this time of the year. And then the foliage is a really nice clump of heart-shaped ginger foliage. So it's Saruma henryi, or upright ginger. Beautiful little soft yellow flowers. This is fairly dry shade here. It's a great plant. Just a couple of other quick ones in here. Our erythroniums, or trout lilies, do really, really well in our garden. They take a while to bulk up, but we're at a point now where we're taking our bigger clumps that have been in the ground for a few years and spreading them out in areas of the garden that are more visible from the house. We've got a few tucked away in corners that we planted them. We're moving them all to more visible areas because we just love them, and they love our conditions here. You can see that, you know, hostas are just sort of coming out of the ground. Ferns are just coming out of the ground. So where this fern is, we had bulbs. Then we've got Saruma. We've got trout lilies. Then we'll have a beautiful clump of ferns here for the summer. It's a great way to make use of a lot of the space in your garden by layering it. Now I'm going to show 2 plants. So a lot of people have a plant in their garden that's called celandine poppy. That's this guy. It is a rampant weed. It's Chelidonium majus. It has a yellow flower similar to the Styloforums, but smaller. Very similar foliage. If you get them into the garden together, you may have a bit of a tough time telling them apart. But I'm going to show you a couple of things. The bad guy, the Chelidonium, has hairy stems. You can see the hairy stems there. Mm-hmm. Hairy leaves, all that. That's all there. Styloforum, smooth stems. No hair.
Freshly shaved.
Foliage is very similar, so that's a hard one to tell. Flowers, again, yellow, chelidonium not as big and full, styloforum, big sort of cup-shaped poppies. But the big giveaway is the seed pods. Chelidonium, the weed, has these long, thin, slender seed pods. This is just a little one. These will actually get about, good 2 inches long anyway. But they're long and slender and stick up out of the cluster of flowers. Styloforum has these fuzzy, rounded seed pods that will stand up like this. You get it there? The seed pods stand up like this when they're young. As they mature, they will droop and then drop their seed. Chelidonium tends to scatter the seed from these long, slender things, and it can be an extremely aggressive weed. We have it in a number of places in the garden. If we suppress it with dense plantings, and you can see how dense our plantings are, there really is no ground visible. You can kind of suppress the chelidonium until we renovate an area and dig stuff out and disturb the soil. Then we get millions of these sprouting in the garden, and then it's a bit of a challenge right away to get rid of them. But the styloforum, even though it reseeds, we love it. We allow it to reseed. I'd actually like to get it in a couple of different areas too, because it is in an area right now, as beautiful as it is, an area we don't go very often, but makes a great show. So there's a few items to look for the shade garden to bridge that gap between your bulbs and your bigger perennials. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention about the Virginia bluebells. I'll move up to these ones more later. There's a nice little patch of cerumas here too. The Virginia bluebells are often available from mail order companies as a root, and they certainly will grow that way, but they don't like to stay dry. So often the root you buy has been sitting out, it's been out of the ground for a while, it's deteriorating very quickly. If you can get potted Virginia bluebells that are growing and have never dried out, you'll be much better off. It takes forever to establish them from the dry root that you get from mail order sources most of the time. So watch for freshly dug or container grown plants, and you'll have a much better success rate, and they'll start seeding and naturalizing really right away.
I think Sophie's talking about the yellow flower, but she has one blooming that has a mustard yellow stem when cut.
Yes.
Which one is it?
So the chelidonium, let me go back to my pieces here. I'll put them in the proper hands. When you cut or pull the bad weed, you get, let's see if I can squeeze it out of there, yellow sap. See, that's actually staining my finger yellow. And it gets kind of orange. You can see it there. There it is better there.
Yeah.
You get that yellow sap. You do not get that on the styloforum. You don't get that yellow sap. Maybe a tiny bit, but not nearly as prevalent. If you have that real yellow sap that stains your fingers, that's the chelidonium. That's the one you don't want. They're fairly easy to pull, which is nice, but they do create quite a seed bank in the ground, so you need to be very careful of that. Any other questions today?
That's does Artemisia grow on old wood or new wood, and how do I propagate it?
Artemisia. Well, there's a few different Artemisias out there. Most of our perennial artemisias, well, there are some that die down to the ground for the winter, some that are shrubs, some that are sort of halfway between. The trailing ones, we would take new growth tip cuttings off any of them, and they should root fairly easily. The perennial ones that are herbaceous, like Silver King, for example, those you can take cuttings, or you can also just dig in at this time of the year and get a rooted shoot and transplant it and do it that way. You can really do them all similar fashions, even though they are some different growth habits.
That was the only questions.
All righty. We'll wrap it up for today. It is Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day.
When is your open house?
Open house day. We are open the long weekend. Friday, which I think is the 16th of May. Is that correct? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday of...
I think it's the 16th.
The long weekend from 10 till 2. You can go to Mason House Gardens and get more information about that. We'll have lots of plants for sale. Not everything's ready yet. It's a little early in the season for a lot of our things still. But, you know, we've got lots of cool stuff coming right along. If you want to say, hey, can I see if the bluebells are still blooming, I'll bring you up to the garden and let you look at that too. But there are some weeds around, so you got to forgive us for that. Anyway, we'll leave you with that. Have a good day. Have a good week gardening. And we'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.